I do have something to add on to what Bill said in this last session when he talked about this book on an overhead projector. He may not be aware of this. He was talking about the Revelation chapter. If you're still into overheads, this will be a salient point. You can really score points with your students if you reach into your pocket and pull out some change on an overhead. And we kind of call this the coverall. You just take some change and you just kind of throw it onto the overhead, and it covers up certain aspects. And then as you go through your lesson with the overhead, you just kind of pull things off and do it that way. That's just one more way to use the overhead. He probably didn't go over it. When I was a grad student here at ACU, I was taught how to use the overhead projector. Now, last week, myself, George, and Stephen Baldridge, who you may have heard last night, were in Long Beach, California at the Campus Technology Forum Conference, and we were presenting some material there on an evidence-based implementation of online face-to-face and blended learning. Well, interestingly, we ran into some people from the Moody Bible Institute, and we were talking about this, and we were all jazzed because you know how you get together and you get all lathered up when you're people of the same passion. And we're getting all lathered up, and he said, yeah, we were researching and talking about what makes a good best practice among faculty. And the guys from Moody Bible Institute said, yeah, here's what we found. We surveyed all of our students, and the guy who came back consistently on the top of the list is the only technology he uses is, guess what? An overhead projector. I said, well, so what do you do? How do you transition? I said, because, you know, you're in Chicago. You probably won't take too much to get this guy whacked, put him in the East River, and just move on. And I said, we'd thought about that. But what they said is, we give this guy the best overhead projector, the one with all the bells and whistles, and make sure it works. And we're just riding this thing out. And I said, well, you know, that's a good point. I said, because from a research standpoint, you've got to ask the question, why not? And one of the questions that we're asking now is, what is the best learning environment for this learning to take place? So is it possible, is it feasible that in his class an overhead projector is the best learning environment for his situation? Now, it's possible that it's not. But I think what we have done at ACU and the transition that we're making in our research is, for the first couple of years, we looked at usage statistics and we did surveys because we kind of needed to get our finger on the pulse of how this was rolling out with students. How are they using it? How are they enacting it? How are the faculty using it? What are our plans as we did some research projects? Where we're at now is where we feel the field of mobile learning is, and that is kind of in a transition point. That in any field, after a few years, you need to make a transition from survey and usage to what are the analytics? How does this impact learning outcomes? So what we've done now is establish a research agenda. And I'm going to give it to you because I'm really proud of it. It's an evidence-based approach to mobile learning pedagogy. An evidence-based approach to mobile learning pedagogy. And to break it down really simply, does it work and why? We're in a conversation recently in a meeting, and a question came up that somebody was asking about. They had learned about Camtasia, and somebody in their department said, how do we use this? And I said, I think a better question is, Camtasia, why do we use this? In other words, I don't know about you, but I've been in enough conferences and I've been in enough LinkedIn discussion groups that you ever notice that the flavor becomes, have you heard the new technology that's out? Voki is now hot. So all of a sudden, everybody in their online class and in their face-to-face class email, all of a sudden you're getting all these links to an avatar. You get some weird, distorted version of someone who thinks they look like this, and you see their lips moving, and it's their voice. And all of a sudden, it's just proliferating in all these courses, and I'm thinking, why is that? Is it because it's the latest technology, or because we actually think the student will have better outcomes as a result of interacting with this particular piece of technology? So that's kind of how we are now asking, what is the best learning environment and what is the best tool to accomplish the learning outcome for our student? That's kind of a transition that we're taking. Now what we're going to do this morning is we're going to talk to some of our expert faculty members here this morning and talk a little bit about how they are addressing mobility in the environments that they're doing. The first person that you're going to hear from is Dr. Scott Perkins. Scott Perkins is, let me give you a quick backstory. Scott and I both went to Penn State, not at the same time. When I came here at ACU, Scott, we were there at the same time. We just didn't know it. We went, there's two churches in State College, and he went to one, I went to the other. And when I got to ACU, found out Scott was here, we ended up at the same church. And Scott kind of became one of my academic and just personal idols. Really neat guy, smart. So to be here, frankly, introducing and working with Scott is, to me, sometimes I get up and pinch myself thinking, I get to work with him every day. So, okay, all right. Yes, Dr. Perkins. Yes.
Good morning. I want to talk with you real quickly about three different things. We're going to talk for a minute about the results of faculty surveys. I look at faculty perceptions, then look at a little bit of information from our students on their perceptions of our program. Then I want to talk about summaries of several different iPad studies that were done last year, and focus on a project just at the end of that one of our grad students in psychology did last spring, looking at reading across some platforms. So if you just hold with me, we're really looking at the perceptions of students and faculty about our mobile learning program over the first 3 years of our initiative, this being year 4. And as you may well understand, in year 1, we had devices in the hands of freshmen and sophomore, or freshmen only. Year 2, freshmen and sophomores. Last year was our first year to have a fully undergraduate campus saturated with devices. So here are 3 years worth of data from our faculty's perspective on the overall success of the program. I think the IT kind of interested folks in here will be curious about, did we communicate adequately? Did we provide the right amount of training? Was it easy to use? I'm really interested in the first and last of these bars. If we look at program of success, that number has been 90% positive or more all 3 years of our initiative. These are 6-point Likert items, so slightly agree to strongly agree, all are collapsed. Those look green, the others all look a different color. And so if you'll focus over to the right, use regularly for class, didn't make a lot of headway in year 1. Remember, devices only in the hands of freshmen. Ask yourself the question, how many saturated classes, meaning every student has a device, would you get if you gave to all full-time student entering freshmen? And we had about a 92% coverage rate, even in the exclusively freshman classes, because of part-time students, students from around town, and so on. So that number bumped up significantly when deployment went ahead. Here's one more slide from faculty perspective. This really is targeting dimensions of student engagement following Sandy Aston's definition. We just split out student engagement into 7 different questions. So here are several of those on the right. First, if we start with things on your left, if you ask faculty, having mobile devices in your class made a difference in the student's grade or their effort, the faculty members say no. My students aren't working harder, their grades are not necessarily better just because of having these devices. But the students are more engaged, participate, collaborate, active learning, communicate better with me, and so on. So at a level of student engagement, at least according to the faculty, we have a significant result from the beginning, consistent across years. This is actually from the last year's December survey. And we get the same kind of feedback from students, although students are also a little more quick to attribute improvements in academic performance, at least at the levels of productivity and organization and so on. Statistics like the first one, that everybody's carrying their device to class, really is very important, and obviously a platform for success. You can look through the rest of those: collaboration, accomplish things more quickly. The control of the learning environment, at least at a perceptual level, also I would argue is pretty important for students. Here's another interesting slide. This is actually from December of 2008. So from the very first year, we began to see iPhone versus iPod Touch differences. You may understand that we've offered students one or the other device. If they pick the phone, they've got to carry the plan themselves, and many of our students can't do that. That's been a third to a quarter of the students have gone the iPod Touch route, and consistently now across both students and faculty, we get this device difference. And so that's kind of an interesting thing to stick in the back of your mind. We'd rather have everybody in the same platform with phones. Phones go everywhere, even to the intramural field. You leave your iPod Touch at home because it might get stolen, but your phone you got to have with you. But obviously the plan and the cost differences have made that a challenge. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about iPad experimentation. We've not been out on the forefront of deploying iPads all across our campus. Cost and other factors have really prohibited rapid movement in that direction. We did have a number of projects conducted on campus last year and more ongoing this year. Several full semester projects. Ian Shepard, who will speak to us in a few minutes, was a part of one of those last year, and then a number of shorter term projects. But I've just kind of put together a slide summarizing results across a bunch of those studies, and I just wanted to share these things with you. Our students have extremely high expectations for digital texts. They say it's easier to read, they like it, it engages them, they learn better. They say all the right things that you would want them to say to be able to launch something. Now, the success, the demonstration of effect for that, I think, will be in the results that follow, and some of our researchers who are following will talk about learning outcome kinds of studies they're conducting this year. Secondly, when we've surveyed in some when we've studied in some controlled experimental kinds of settings student annotation preferences, it's easy for the developers to get the annotation tools way more sophisticated than the students are actually going to use. Give me highlighting, give me underlining, give me a way to tag and hyperlink, give me 2 or 3 other things, maybe if you teach me how to use them in a course-specific manner, but probably 3 or 4 is as far as they're going to go. So the systems I see with 10 to 20 different tools, I'm a little suspicious about, and our students so far have said that's too much. If you can add social feedback, one of the textbooks we used had a follow me feature where the instructor and the teachers could see each other's comments on the text, and the students like that. So engaging their social media habits when they get here, I think, is also important. Obviously, usage patterns vary by length of time. When the devices are really yours and you have it forever, or you have it at least for a whole semester, things work a lot better than when we only give it to you for 3 weeks. No surprise there. And then, of course, our students have been in positions to provide feedback to app developers, and on some of our locally developed apps, the challenge of keeping updates and upgrades and things fresh has been a real challenge. I want at this point to move along and talk about the challenges I see for digital text, and the first of these I think is obvious. If it's just the paper text moved to a digital platform, we really haven't solved the equation. And if the cost of that paper text on a digital platform is the same as it was for the paper book, then we've shot ourselves in both feet, I guess I would say. So those are significant challenges. The third challenge that I want to highlight for just a moment before I end is we really need demonstrations of the efficacy of learning, reading comprehension, transfer of information across platforms before we jump in all the way with purchase of digital text and moving along. So one little study from last spring, a social psychology chapter from an intro psychology textbook. This was grad student Ryan Gertner who conducted this study, had them read a chapter on an iPad, read a chapter out of the textbook, compared those 2 groups, found no significant difference for reading comprehension, but a statistically significant difference for learning transfer or transfer of information. Here's just a histogram to show you what those results look like in terms of the group means. And my only point is to say, listen to the guys that are going to follow me as they talk about studying learning across the things that they're moderating within their classrooms. I think it's really interesting. I think we're on the beginning of getting the answers to the questions we've really been after. Remember that scientific advance is slow. Remember that we learn things when we prove it's not true, the principle of disconfirmation. And a lot of the audiences that we speak to have been a little, including our own administrative, have been a little impatient with the rate at which faculty members think science is going to progress. But we're doing the work, and here's at least an initial demonstration that's pretty exciting to us.
This is Brent Reeves, and I'm Ian Shepard, and we've been working the last year or so on some data that we've been finding in the classrooms. In the fall of last year, I was asked to teach a completely paperless class using the iPad, and I was also teaching at the same time some macro classes. Both of those macro classes were completely laptop-based. So I kind of had an interesting platform where I could compare 50 students in an iPad class to 2 different classes of 50 students using macro. So using a laptop. So throughout the semester, I had been thinking, well, what are the differences in how these kids use the devices that they have? So we came up with the idea of kind of looking at the use patterns of a laptop student. What does that look like versus what an iPad student looks like? And what we wanted to do was just the data that we had basically was the Blackboard access data and the logs of a Blackboard system. So what we did was we wanted to take that information and kind of present it visually to allow us to see what was going on. So we came up with the idea of using a heat map. In other words, where are the hot spots when a typical student would be using this type of device versus others. And the visuals that we found pointed out that the iPad had a more diffused use pattern. And so when you think about it, a laptop, even though it's touted as being mobile, typically is not mobile. It's sitting on a desk somewhere, and it's in my room, or it's in my library, in my classroom, versus the iPad, which is a truly mobile device. And so what we wanted to look at was over 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, what does a laptop student look like? What does an iPad student look like? And so we did that just as a quick snapshot for last semester. And so kind of being a petri dish for research, we asked the question, is it worthwhile for ACU to track all users and the data patterns that they have here at ACU and help us in our support for that research? So if you think of ACU as a petri dish, then you can think of Brent and I as the scum at the bottom. And what we wanted to become as the scum is to suck in all the data that these students were creating and faculty were creating. And so we came up with this Mobile Research Fellow grant, and Brent's going to tell you a little bit about how that works.
Guess I'm the other scum-sucking presenter, huh? You can read faster than I can speak, so there is he mentioned pattern. So I might can know when people are on, and I might can know where. We would like to know both. We don't know where yet, but we do know with what. So we know when and with what. So if you access his Blackboard class at 9 p.m. Sunday night with an iPad, we know that. We're working on the location, and really soon now we'll have the data. Really soon that will be happening.
The interesting thing is when you start to think about what data will look like, it allows us to ask some interesting questions. For instance, does location make a difference? And if there are typical learning spots where people congregate at school, for instance, if it's in the atrium of the business building rather than in a classroom, it's interesting to know that may drive some decisions around how we design courses and classes. And so we wanted to add different levels and add different levels of reporting. So, given the data that we have, we were able to download some information, and this is the type of tool that we want to be able to give the research people at ACU here. For instance, this is just data for a week snapshot that I pulled down for a class. It's called a pivot table. Basically, it allows us to select any of the variables and reduce down. I could, for instance, look at married and not married. Is there a difference in the use patterns of a married student and a non-married student? And there is. And there's a big difference when you look at the data out there. And so by being able to get the data and have a look at it by hour of day and day of week, we can develop some patterns. You want to click the next one? The patterns that come up are, for instance, look like this. When you have a look at the two classes on the left, we have laptop classes. And the laptop class, if you have a look at them, if you think of green as not used, so there's nothing happened during those hours of use, but look at the redder colors, and you'll notice that laptops are kind of used in different ways at different times. So if you look at the 8 a.m. class, this profile typically occurs afternoon on a Monday through about 11 p.m. In a fixed sort of location and time, perhaps designed around where their laptop is. And then if you look at the same sort of thing is supported if you look at the laptop macro 9:30 a.m. class, it's the same sort of information. But when you get to the iPad is different again. It shows us that the iPad we think we want to be able to support this is that the iPad is a much more mobile device. Learning is different with an iPad device than with a laptop. With a laptop, typically it's still in one spot. I have to set it up. With an iPad, I can carry it with me everywhere. There are more moments of learning. And so we just wanted to show you what's possible. This is the type of data that we're generating, use by hour, by day, in the different categories of iPads. Every device, we'll be able to look at iPhone, iTouch, any of the devices that we register, a laptop, to be able to put together information about what's happening. And then we wanted to just show you some drill down. So what we did was we grabbed the iPad class, and we wanted to just go to the next one here. Well, what does it look like if you're a female versus a male? Well, in the iPad class, apparently the males use their devices more often looking for educational content than the females. That's kind of interesting, which brings us to Brandon.
Okay, we have 7 minutes. I'm fixing to give you one. Turn to your neighbor and predict what the next graph's going to show. On the left will be students less than 3.0 GPA. On the right will be male students greater than 3.0 on the right. Tell your neighbor what you think it will show. All right, let's see which of you people are visionaries.
Apparently, the less than 3 watch afternoon football. If you notice, there's no use between the hours of 1 and 4-ish on that day. You know, it's not absolutely great. But what we're able to do is I just want you to understand the power of being able to look at things like this. Having the data there and being able to slice and dice it gives us all these different visuals. Yes. In these classes, it's 43 students. You know, we can look at things, how many active hours on average, how many students are in there, how many times they hit devices. You know, the interesting thing coming out of it is going to be things like, you know, if we're looking at engagement in classroom, if a student actually hits a website in Blackboard and we're working in class and we think they're engaged, what if they're actually, once our full data starts coming in, what if they're in Blackboard and they're also in iTunes and they're also in a gambling site and they're also in something else? You know, does that mean that they're actually engaged at that time? And so the data that we're collecting is going to allow us to go deep, very deep into the learning methodology and the process of what a student thinks they can do and what they're actually doing. And it gets rid of a lot of self-reporting. You know, we often self-report, yes, I use this application. Well, when you go back and really look at it, did they really actually use the application at the time they said it? And so a lot of the self-reporting we do. Yes? Yes. That's midnight to 1 a.m., yeah. Midnight to 1 a.m. Yeah. And, you know, we're interested in ideas of what to collect and look at, so feel free to chime in and email us. I think our emails are on the website.
Well, good morning. Kenny Jones, I'm in the Art and Design Department, and I've been very interested in seeing what mobile technology can do for us in terms of affecting students' perception of their built environment. So since I'm teaching foundational classes in art and design, 2D design, 3D design, I'm very interested in how the iPhone can leverage a looking glass, something that you can hold up in the world around you and everything becomes clickable, linkable. Maybe you've heard of augmented reality. It's this notion that if I use the camera in real time, the smartphone can tell where I am and what direction I'm pointing it. It can leverage the GPS, the compass, the accelerometer information. And because of that, that now means that what I'm pointing it at, I can layer digital content on top of. And so you can specifically tell it when you're in these coordinates looking in this direction. For example, if you are on Abbey Road and you have the Layer app, L-A-Y-A-R, and you point it at the crosswalk anywhere in that area, you'll see the reenactment of the Abbey Road cover of the Beatles. So there's entertainment apps out there that are already utilizing this. Something that might have been a little more serious is the Layer app, in which you can go to a construction site and see what that building's going to look like in situ. You can walk around it 360, in some instances even go inside it if you can get to that spot. So I thought, well, that's exactly what I'm doing with my overhead projectors, right? I'm putting these transparencies on top of the artworks and saying, see these shapes, look at, and I'm thinking if they do that instead of seeing me do that, I think that should impact their perception. I think they should be able to describe their world in more detail. I know that's one of the challenges in art and design classes, is to get them to talk specifically about what they really see, as opposed to I like it, I dislike it, that's a dog. And so the visual language is what I'm trying to get across: line, shape, color, texture, space. So this idea then that we're going to go to a real built environment artwork. This is here on the ACU campus, Jack Maxwell's Jacob's Dream. And if you haven't had a chance to walk around there, it's a great experience. But I thought this is the kind of site that students already know about, they're already excited about. And what if we were to try to design an augmented reality app? Now you got to realize I'm teaching a 2D design foundational class. I don't have time to teach them computer code. So what we're really making is a simulation of augmented reality, a little flip book animation that shows that possibility. So, sort of a proof of concept, rough comp is what we would call that. How to tease out the differences. So I had two classes. I had an afternoon class and a morning class. And we chose one of them to be our focus group that would go to the site, analyze it, and then design an augmented reality app for it. So we did that. We went and analyzed it, looked at it, took photographs. As a matter of fact, both the classes did, even the comparison group. We were engaged in the same kind of analysis. What's the visually compelling and evocative stuff here that you would like to push forward and envision for a viewer? And then we had to think about demographics. We have a lot of school children who visit the site, so we thought, okay, well, that's going to be a different content than possibly the college student or the senior citizen who might come to look at it. So we did a lot of envisioning information discussion in all of this. Both groups, the focus group that's making the AR simulation and the comparison group, which made a simple pamphlet. The one on the right there is our little flip book movie that was the final project for the focus group. And you can see they're trying to navigate you around and then reveal both shapes. Even had an interesting translation. There's text written on the sculpture, Bible verses. So he had a translator built in. He thought, well, I can do anything. And this is one of the interesting parts about this. They begin to really think about reality as being a Wikipedia that you can click and link to. The one on the right is our comparison group, in which we just made a traditional pamphlet, something that would be a hard copy that maybe a school child could access and play with, and thereby see different aspects of it. Okay, so those were the two projects that hopefully the one group is going to be more immersed in this augmented reality. They're thinking about how they're going to show information in an augmented reality way. They're producing simulations or rough drafts of that, whereas the other group is pretty well keeping it as a two-dimensional traditional interface. Well, so so there should be a difference, right, in how these two people see, as two groups see, and so how do we measure that? So I gave an essay early on in the class about midterm to both groups, asking them to analyze the near transfer artifact. So in this instance, it would be the statue, Jacob's Dream, that they are making the project for. So they were given a list of design terms and prompted to write as much as they could about it. Then after they've written about that, then give them a novel artifact, a far transfer artifact. And in this instance, this is where we're really hoping to see the payoff, right? That not only can they analyze that one piece of reality, but they can apply this to other things. So the far transfer was something that had nothing to do in a design sense with the original artifact. This is Arthur Dove's foghorns, more the one on the top there is more abstract. Okay, well, that was the pre-experiment right before we did their projects, and then during finals week came back and gave the same essay again. They analyzed the same near transfer artifact, and all within the covert operation of telling them this is a grade, this is for your grade, see how you've improved and everything, and then gave them a new far transfer artifact. The one at the bottom here is the one I'll be using. And so I did this last school year, and the information at the time I was really excited about when we did the far transfer post-experiment data and saw a huge difference between the two groups, and we were just very excited about that. But by the way, Dr. Robert McIlvaine, who's really been helping me with the research component of this, and also Scott has been a marvelous counselor for this, has said, no, you really can't trust this. You're going to have to see the before and after of this. And sure enough, he was right. We came back and looked at the data, and it looked like the first group had differences compared to it than the other. They had blown the top off at the first test. So we got there scratching our head, what's happened here? And I think one of the things that we were able to gain from the first phase of this research is that, number one, we can measure this effect, and the inter-rater reliability number is high. It's 0.98. So we felt like we have a robust way to measure. Is there a difference? What are these things? What are these things that they're writing about? And so we got from that. The second one we realized was, okay, this shouldn't be so far into the semester. We should do this on day one. And of course, our reasoning for that originally was, well, they don't even know the words we're using, So, boy, it's going to have to go up, right? But we began to realize these are two completely separate groups. There's a lot of things we can't tease out in this. For example, I don't know, which group do you think did better, the 8 a.m. one or the 1:30 one? And that's what the data showed. 1:30 did better. So, well, maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe I'm a little, more awake too. So this whole idea of the different. So we weren't able to randomize these the ways we wanted to. This is one of the problems with the field experiment research is not having complete control over these randomizing elements. So this semester we're doing it. I think we've learned from those from that first one, and what I did was give it early on. Then I'm going to have this project be a randomized separation of the class, in which they go off on individual study for the last 2 weeks of the semester. And so I won't know who, on the front end, who it is that's going to be doing the focus project and who it is that's going to be doing the comparison project. Hopefully this will help us tease out some of these variables that we're showing along with it. Just as a kind of sideline, one of the things that I began to wonder if maybe was the big difference was maybe I was more excited about that augmented reality class. And I'm thinking, well, a placebo effect is still an effect, right? And if it gets the headache gone, I'll take the placebo. So maybe there's some spin-off research that has to do with this as well.
I'm sorry to have arrived a little bit late. I was teaching class this morning. My name is Cynthia Powell, and I've been working on using mobility in chemistry labs. I've been working particularly in using mobility to enhance inquiry-based learning. And so I want to tell you about research that I've done over the last 3 years and then kind of where it's taking me. I want to tell you about mobile enhanced inquiry-based learning. I teach entry-level students, and so we have students who come to us with a number of different backgrounds. Some of them have had a lot of lab work experience. Some of them have had almost no lab work experience. And when you're trying to teach an inquiry-based curriculum where students are planning their own laboratory experiments, doing a lot on their own, they really need a baseline of knowledge in order to do that effectively. If you've looked at some of the controversy over inquiry-based learning, a lot of the controversy surrounds throwing students into a situation that they're not prepared to handle. And so when ACU began their mobile initiative, I saw a really great opportunity to use the mobile devices as a support for students to give them information when they needed it, as they needed it, to help them be really good at planning their own experiments in the chemistry lab. So on mobile devices, we can supply written documents. We can provide material safety data sheets, which we're required by law to have on file for all of our chemicals. Safety information, we can use them as search tools, as the response tool. But the centerpiece of this approach is podcasts that have been prepared locally that address chemistry calculation topics and laboratory techniques. Now, a lot of chemistry departments have provided video podcasts for a number of years on their department sites, and they're usually intended for use before the laboratory begins as a pre-lab exercise. And that's great, but the problem is the student watching that podcast at home doesn't have the titration set up in front of them and can't really see what they're getting ready to do. And so the availability on a mobile device allows a student to watch it before they come to class, but also to come into class when they are in the midst of working, pull up a resource, and be able to follow what they need to do and what they need to understand so that they can effectively complete a lab and plan a laboratory. Okay, we can use them for additional things. We submit our lab reports electronically, and this is a page from one of the students' lab reports last year where they'd taken pictures of their results and inserted them. This week we're doing flame tests. I don't know if we have any chemists in here, but we had great fun this week taking pictures of our flame tests and looking at what they looked like and inserting them. It's a great memory tool, but also just helps the students have a resource that they can more effectively describe what they've seen and communicate about that later. Okay, one of the questions that people always ask is, well, I've prepared resources before and students don't really use them. So one of the things that we wanted to look at was whether or not students would use these resources in the classroom. So the first couple of years that these were deployed, they were not available outside of class. I can explain this all to you if you want me to, but we were able to track the usage during class. They were not required to use them. They were using them as a resource. And we found that students, in fact, were using them. You can see access events per team. This is student group for the different podcasts that were deployed during the semester. One of the things I worked really hard on was preparing a tool so that we could track interactions between students and instructors. We expect to see a difference in the way the students were interacting with instructors. And this is one slide of about a 3-year research project, and this is probably an hour-and-a-half presentation you're getting in one slide. So if you want to talk more about it later, I'll talk about it. This is quasi-experimental design. I looked very carefully at the different groups. We know that they are comparable in all the ways that we were able to measure. And we did see a statistically significant difference in the way the students were interacting about things that they needed very rudimentary support on, how to use a balance, how to do a particular type of calculation. And our hope is that this allows more time for our instructors to work on the more important things, which are the concepts and the ideas and the development of the technique, rather than on the rudimentary things. You can see, if you're into this kind of statistics, that that we have a rather large Cohen's d here. Okay. On assessments that were done in lab between these two comparable groups, we didn't see any significant differences between the groups at large. But whenever we tease them out, looking at for any interaction effects in demographics, we classified students as students with low motivation, students with mid-range motivation, and students who are highly motivated. And it's very interesting that the students who are classified as highly motivated and had access to the podcast, as compared to the students who had the same information provided for them in lecture format, were actually able to perform at a higher level. And that really shouldn't be surprising, because if you have a student who is highly motivated and they have a resource that they can access as needed, I think they're more likely to do that than the students who are less motivated, and we saw positive outcome. So the next step in this little project has been partnering with two institutions, California University of Pennsylvania and Del Mar College, and Dr. Hather Hill is here today, so I know he'd be glad to talk to you. We applied for a Next Generation Learning Challenge grant, which was funded, and we are working on deploying the MEBLE approach, Mobility Enhanced Inquiry-Based Learning approach, to classrooms at these other universities that are quite different than ours. Our PI at California University works with students in a rural setting. It's a university that's larger than ours. It has much greater disadvantaged population than we have. Rob is working at Del Mar College, which is a community college, which is in a large metropolitan area, pretty large compared to Abilene for sure. He also has a very large part-time student population, and again, a large group of students who are more disadvantaged. And so we're excited about seeing how this might provide an edge to students who do come from different backgrounds and maybe have weaker foundation than all of the students that we've been dealing with. Both Louise and Rob are also biologists, and so I've learned a good bit about biology in the last couple of years, couple of months. This project involved a conference that we put together this summer. We brought in folks from each of these campuses. We spent a good bit of time talking about how to develop resources, how to deploy those resources, and we're in the process now of collecting data specifically to see how we might leverage this approach to increase the depth of student learning. And so look for upcoming results from that study.